Welcome back to another episode of Titans of Now. Titans is a showcase of ServiceNow personalities that have punched above their weight and elevated the ServiceNow community. Titans of Now is brought to you by me, Robert the Duke Fedoric. If you want to see what I'm up to, check out my website, theduke.digital. Here you'll find all my CJ and the Duke episodes, links to my YouTube content, and my upcoming course, Hired, the definitive guide to profiles that win ServiceNow jobs. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's so good to have you here. After a super long hiatus, Titans of ServiceNow is back, and we are starting things off with a bang. This Titan has been a multiple-time ServiceNow MVP, a 3-time community MVP, and a 3-time dev MVP. They're a 5-time knowledge speaker. They have 7 apps in the store, some of which are absolutely huge. And I can't wait to introduce you to Mr. Paul Morris. Paul, thanks for coming to the show.
Hey Rob, or should I say the Duke, as you're more widely known. Thanks for having me on the show.
You are welcome. It's my honor, and it's evening time over there, right?
Yep, 7:30 p.m.
For those who don't know, Paul Morris is in Australia, where everything can kill you.
It's truth, mate.
All right. We had a great intro, but we forgot to record it, and so we're trying to make up for last time. You missed the conversation about everything.
You should have been there.
So, yeah. Oh, man. I'll never be able to record anything like that again, ever.
Okay, best things happen off camera.
So we always start at the start. Tell us how you got your start with ServiceNow.
Yes, so going back to 2012, the company I worked for gave 4 of us the opportunity within our company to go to a ServiceNow implementation boot camp. So I don't think those exist anymore. There wasn't like a certification for it or anything. It was just like, hey, we get to go to Melbourne with 3 of my colleagues. Melbourne is like a very cosmopolitan kind of city in Australia. It's probably the most like Europe. There's like lots of bars, lots of laneways and alleys, and works just like you can spend 3 days in Melbourne and do this ServiceNow training. I'm like, yeah, ServiceNow sounds cool. I was currently working on HP OVSD, HP Service Manager, CA Service Desk.
No way. Which version of OVSD were you on?
Yeah. Oh, I think it was like, I might be just making up numbers here, but I think it was like 4.5.
Oh,
roughly.
Okay. You were on the good one.
Rings a bell. It wasn't good when I was using it on Service Desk.
Well, we were using 5.1, and we were like, I was all in the communities being like, how come this sucks so bad? And they're like, well, you went to 5. You should have stayed at 4. Yeah. That's your problem.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Everything was fixed by restarting the service.
Oh man.
So yeah, I was an ITSM tools person, but I wasn't in ServiceNow, and we just recently won a contract to implement ServiceNow. One of like the first customers in Western Australia, or at least I believe it was, and we were our company was one of the first partners. We had to fly someone over from India because we needed to have like someone that had like 5 years experience or something, which was like no one had that in Perth because barely anyone had ServiceNow. It was kind of new, mostly implemented in America. So we needed to skill up a bunch of people on it. So we flew over this implementation boot camp, which was just kind of a real quick, like, here's how everything you need to know to implement ServiceNow in 3 days. And then in the end, we did an exam, like in an instance, no simulators like there are now, and had to like answer question sheets as well as we went along. And didn't even matter if we passed or failed because we didn't get a cert. It was just like learn ServiceNow quickly. So that was a whole lot of fun. And then I was just like, oh my God, this is so much better than all the other stuff by like so like bigger than the biggest widescreen monitor you can imagine. It was just, and I went to uni as well. So I was like, I can actually start to use some of my university training now because this is like a proper development platform here. Let's go. And from there, I was like, I'm going all in on this. This is amazing.
You use the words proper development platform, which is kind of the thing that struck me too. Like you're sitting there and you're developing a solution for something that's IT related, but you get bitten by that bug that makes you think, oh, this is way, way, way bigger than IT. So in that sense, what was your first
experience with ServiceNow that took you way outside of IT?
Yeah, so I did have the way outside of IT experience where one of our customers, they bought customer service management. Well, they were going to buy HR service delivery, so I had to quickly rush through and get my HR service delivery implementation specialist, as it often does if you're like in the world working for a partner, you'll have a new customer and there's an expectation that you have someone with implementation specialists. So you just go and do it and then get the cert, even though you've never actually implemented it before, and have to pretend like you're the expert, always be one step ahead. But the customer didn't end up buying HR service delivery. They bought CSM. And I opened up the case form and there was like a field called contact and a field called consumer. And I don't know if you've ever used CSM, Duke, or are familiar with it, but I was like, what's a consumer and a contact? I've never heard of that. And I've got like a workshop in an hour. What do I do? So I just like,
oh my goodness,
renamed them or moved them off the form because they had weird behavior and just put in like raised by and raised for instead. And I was like, I have no idea what this is about. I'll have to look it up later. And also, like, you're dealing with stakeholders that aren't IT, which is just a whole different ball game as well. Like, people that work in IT, they work in projects day in, day out. They kind of can empathize with you. But when you're dealing with non-IT, their world isn't like projects every day. And they just don't have the same maturity around operating under like a project framework. So they'll don't realize the impact of like withholding requirements. They don't see how much of a big deal that is. Like with IT, they kind of know you got to give it most of it up front and then like the little bits later. But they would just like come out with showstoppers out of nowhere, and you'd be like, I didn't know this was a requirement, and they just have this different expectation of how the tool works that they don't think it's a requirement that they need to talk about.
You're right. So. I think there's a culture, or at least there was a culture in IT around building stuff. And so everybody was kind of used to this idea of like what a requirement is at all, and used to giving significant parts of their day in order to get it built, right? Even if I'm just the person that tells IT how this is supposed to work. But outside of IT, it's kind of like, I am too busy being an HR person to do this build thing with you. Too busy being a lawyer. Too busy being that's kind of like, don't you find that's kind of one of the things that has stood boldly in the face of the idea of citizen developers? Like I remember like way back when we were trying to make, I'm not sure what it was. I think it might've been the catalog builder, which I know you're going to want to talk about.
Yeah. But, how did I not even mention that earlier? Because that's something I've been investing a lot of my professional time in.
Like I remember I worked for a hedge fund and their legal team. This is pre the legal service management package. And they had a ton of catalog items that they wanted in. And, you know, we were talking with the team and we're like, why don't we just give them catalog builder and train them to be like the kind of the no code developer for their own team. And they were like, listen, we're just worth more than you hour wise.
Yeah.
Like, that's why you're here. You build us the catalog items. We're billing out at like $600 an hour to get this hedge fund from, you know, get the government off the hedge fund's back or whatever.
And that's so weird to hear as a ServiceNow consultant, because normally people are like, you're the biggest rate. Like you're talking to all the IT people and you're the top rate card. And then suddenly these people are like, no, you're mean nothing to us.
We're too busy. But even if it wasn't about the money, right? But even if it wasn't about the money, it's like, we're too busy doing the thing that we're supposed to do for the company to be the developer of this. We want you to listen to us and then you do the wrench turning. Anyway, I thought that would be a neat tangent. But since we're on the topic of catalog builder, I do notice on SN Nerd, links are going to be in the description below for that, that is a passion of yours, huh?
Yeah, well, I guess earlier in my career it was ATF, but it's probably pivoted a little bit more to catalog builder as I've had the opportunity to train people at my company. So we do this thing where we go in and we install catalog builder and we install a bunch of like default stuff. Like we have got variable sets pre-created that does the pro code stuff. So the low code, no code people just have it there ready to go, just like date comparison type stuff. They got a variable set for that they can just drag and drop into their forms, and we add extra fulfillment steps that really expands the use cases out. And I also train them how to use Catalog Builder and give them like a masterclass on how, like, everything I've learnt building catalog items in my 10 years of ServiceNow stuff. So I've been thinking about Catalog Builder a lot and playing around with it and understanding it. And as I learn things as I go, like, I'll post a blog about it. And that's why, Rob, you've picked up a pattern that I tend to blog a lot about Catalog Builder. That's kind of as I work on stuff professionally and I find it interesting and can't find any other material out there on it, I'll do a blog post about it. To, like most ServiceNow things, they're like 80% good, but there's like this 20% that's like makes it from like being like, it's okay, to like, wow, this is a game changer. So we kind of did the 20%, wow, this is a game changer, that we deploy in with Catalog Builder when we go in. It's not an accelerator per se. Like, I know you're not a fan of that sort of thing, and I'm not a fan of the way it's typically implemented. It's more of a just pre-built configuration. We don't like touch any out of the box stuff.
Right. Well, when I think about catalogs, I'm thinking about features that help me build features, right?
Yeah, that's
so
it.
It's like if I'm building a better engine to build catalog items is a lot more different than here's how you should deploy ideation and demand. And here's 1,000 updates for it, when the customer's like, hold on a second, we're going to do demand next year.
Yeah.
And we haven't even sat and talked about how so like capability changes to me are a whole different class of thing than like process specific changes, which is the type of accelerator that I charge into battle to rail against.
We started off quite small, and we are quite, the company I work for is quite small in the big scheme of things. But I think a lot of our work early on the scene was fixing up implementations done by big partners that have since been bought by like a partner and then another partner. So they've changed names like so many times now.
Yeah,
we would just go in and like fix their accelerator builds that were just, they weren't configuration on top. They had their own process, kind of like you said. That's the key thing, that they take the process in a bold new direction. Let's just say.
Yeah. Oh man. We have a whole show just on that.
It doesn't scale and it doesn't age well.
So you've been doing this for 10 years, right?
Yeah. It'll be 11 years now.
Oh wow! Congratulations. I want to understand. Was there ever a near breaking point for you? A job you were on where it was like, oh my god, I'm not gonna make it. Like, what was your darkest moment in the ServiceNow space, and how did you get through?
I haven't had like a super dark moments, but I think when we were talking back to doing implementations for non-IT people, I think those have been the biggest challenges. Like, I had one where we were like at the end of the last sprint, and the customer's like, what do you mean teams can see each other's tickets? And like, for us normally it's like, yeah, like that's what you would want. You don't want to build silos, you want everyone to see everything. But it's a little bit outside of IT in a pre-security conscious era. Like, it was just kind of the standard and the default. I was just like, oh yeah, like you can see all the tickets in assignment group A and B and C and D. Like, why wouldn't you? What if like a ticket gets assigned to you and you need to reassign it? And they're just like, no, can't be like this. Stop everything. We got to lock this down. Lock it all down. And then I just kind of had to talk it back to like, okay, well, you might want to transfer tickets, and if someone calls up and says this is a ticket number, you at least want visibility of all the ticket numbers. So let's dial it back a little bit, and let's just make it like limited read only. Can we negotiate that? And they were like, oh, I don't know about that. And I was like, can we just try it? Let's see how we go. We don't have much time. And I just had to build a security model in like 2 days to solve this problem. Oh boy, that was.
Would you say that was one of those instances of it's like they were too familiar with the way it was, and they were like seeking that, or did they have legit kind of
I guess
compliance reasons to not?
If you take it back to how they were working before, it was like mailboxes. So they did have only certain people with certain access to mailboxes. So if you take it back to that, then like to them it makes sense. Like a mailbox is kind of an assignment group in ServiceNow to translate the way they're working before, and people didn't have access prior. So I guess from that perspective, like you kind of see where they're coming from. I just wish I could articulate that to them earlier, so then it could have come up earlier and we could have spent more time planning it out and maybe talking them out of it.
Okay, I want to go back to stuff you're proud of. You mentioned also that you built something along the same lines of ATF. Why don't you tell us about your journey there?
So that certainly goes way back. So in 2014, that Knowledge 14, that was the first time I went to Knowledge. And my business case to my business I worked for was that I wanted to learn about automated testing. So that passed the buck, I guess, and I got sent over. I wasn't speaking or anything, but it was my first Knowledge presentation. This was in San Francisco. So I was just walking around the expo floor going to like every booth saying like, do you guys do automated testing? And some of them like had their own little weird solution, and some were like, oh no, that's a bit of a gap on the platform, hey. And there was like one vendor, I think, that was like building their own automated testing thing. I can't remember if that was Knowledge 14 or not. It might have been later at Knowledge 16. I think it was Knowledge 14. There was a vendor that was doing ATF. I don't think they're necessarily around anymore. It wasn't Automate Pro. Probably got a business card lying around somewhere. But I just wanted to know everything that I possibly could about it. And then one of the ServiceNow guys, can't remember his name, had like a little automated testing solution up on the community, and I just grabbed that and I kept building on it, and then eventually I just rebuilt it and built my own one. And then in Knowledge 16, that's when I went and talked about the ATF solution that I had built sort of myself from scratch, and that was pretty cool. Like speaking in Vegas at a tech conference is something that I never thought I would have the opportunity to do. It just blows my mind now if I think back to when I was in uni and told myself, future self, that, hey, you'd be talking at tech conferences in Vegas. I'd be like, nah, you're lying. And then
4 more times after that, right?
Yeah. And from there, my chief product officer was in the audience, and I was very cheeky. I said, who thinks my chief product officer should sponsor me to build this as an app and put it on the store? And everyone puts their hand up. And my chief product officer was like, oh. So we start building our own automated testing tool. And then I had let's call them a whistleblower. I don't know if you have that term in America, whistleblower. Just, you know what it is? Someone that's leaking information to you from the insides.
It's a different context over here. A whistleblower is more like somebody who does the right thing and says, hey, there's some shady stuff going on.
I'd say it's kind of the right. Well, whistleblower might not quite.
You had a leak. You had somebody that was
someone on the inside told me that ServiceNow was about to release ATF, and I was like, oh god, this is going to ruin my app completely.
Right.
And I managed to get hold of a product manager because I'm like, hey, we're building this for the store. Let's be transparent here. What are you doing? And they gave me a run through, and I was like, okay, so the shelf life of we ended up just releasing the app for free because we were like, oh, it's kind of done. It's kind of done now because what they were building was way better. So,
do you still work on it, or is that thing done?
It went on the store, and we never updated it. So like it went out of release, and didn't really look at it because ATF just did everything and more, way better, because it had full access to the whole platform while I was constrained to a scope where I couldn't really do much with it. So there was a lot of effort to manually populate tests, and that's what I was saying earlier. I knew the GlideForm API pretty well, so I was like, oh, pretty much all the API is there to know like what fields are mandatory, what fields have been populated, what UI action was clicked. Like about 75% of it was there and out of the box API, and you could just use that to generate the test for you, like a recorder. So I just built like my own recorder. There was a little bit of sneaky looking into the DOM to get some stuff like which UI actions were visible because there just is an API for that. And I a couple other stuff that you just couldn't get through the API, but sometimes you just got to do that. And then I just kind of kept working on it, started a Patreon for it because I'd spent a crazy amount of hours on it, unbelievable hours. But it was fun, and it really strengthened my own knowledge of the platform and app development. Kind of made me the skilled professional that I am today on the platform, having very intimate knowledge of it because of the things I had to do building this app. And I have actually recently, I started to go back to it because I'm awaiting ATF supporting configurable workspaces. And then I want to update my app to support the recording functionality in configurable workspaces. They initially said Washington, like, safe harbor, could happen, might not happen. But it's been a bit of a gap because ATF is never, a lot of people probably aren't aware of this, that ATF doesn't support configurable workspaces. So like a lot of people, and ServiceNow is moving all into next experience and configurable workspaces. So all those tests and investment in ATF, at least client side, is kind of like lost its shelf life has expired basically, and there's no replacement really yet. So stay tuned in that area.
Yeah, it kind of makes me nervous. Like, are you saying, do you get the feeling that they are encouraging or forcing?
They've made next experience turned on by default from Vancouver. So it just turns it on, and then you got to turn it off again. And next experience is really the bridge to get into configurable workspaces. It puts a banner at the top and lets you switch into workspaces, and it kind of feels a bit more similar. So they do want you to go into that direction. And I also found out this week that security patches will turn it back on. If you turn it off and the security patch is applied, it turns on next experience again. There is another system property you can enable to stop that from happening, but they are gently nudging us in that direction. And I know it's been like released publicly now through like the ServiceNow YouTube channel that they're moving all reporting into next experience configurable workspaces, and they plan to do that by the like end of the Z life cycle. They expect everyone to be there. So like it's moving there, like it's gonna happen.
So I'll just pray to whatever patron saints of ServiceNow there are out there that they get feature parity before the hard cutoff.
Yeah, and that it's as easy to use as it is in the classic environment.
That legit keeps me up at night. Make sure I have this right here. You configure configurable workspaces with UI Builder, right?
Yeah.
But and when I look at that,
it's not really configuration.
Well, exactly. And when I look at the caliber of people that talk about UI Builder in terms of like, how in the hell do I use this, right? I'm talking about people who are space people to me. Like, these people are hyper intelligent, singularly unique human beings in their intellect and analytical capability. But it used to be, here's a form, here's a list, you right click configure, and like anybody could understand that.
Yeah.
Right. And so it could scale really, really quickly. So it's just like,
it has potential, but I think they just need to they need to add a couple layers of abstraction and some sensible defaults to make it a little bit easier. I was doing like one of the labs at Knowledge that Brad did, and just like creating a custom page with like a list and being able to click through that list to go to the record. Like, you had to do some configuration just to set that up. And I just think like that's just madness to me. Like, I would think what makes sense is there's like a list component, and you like say this table and like add a filter, drag and drop it, and you just get that behavior by default. But for some reason you had to like create an event listener to like make it open the record. And this, I don't know. If you're really good at it, like you can pretty much do anything and it's amazing. And I'm sure that's really great if that's the kind of thing you're into. Right. But for people that just want to do demos and cool stuff quick, more like me, I'm not really hardcore technical. I just
builds his own ATF system. Doesn't say he's hardcore technical.
I don't think of myself as hardcore technical because like I had friends that did like games design where they built their own engines, and I did like a choose your own adventure IT uni degree where I just did whatever I felt like and didn't do anything that was overly difficult. And ATF was just what's on the platform, like understanding the Glide Form API, understanding how you can manipulate session variables. Like most of it's documented. It's not really rocket science. It's just me spending a lot of time on it because I wanted to get good at the platform quickly and wanted to make a name for myself in the industry, because I just couldn't believe the potential when I first, that boot camp 2012, I was just like, wow, this is so easy compared to grassroots software development. You've got a platform there all ready to go and everything's pretty basic and easy to understand. Like, this is crazy how much opportunity there is. Like, I'm just going to go crazy with this and spend hours on the community every week to get good and understand the platform as quickly as possible.
Something about it, huh?
Yeah.
There really is something about it. Well, speaking about the platform, if there was anything that you could change about the platform or the ecosystem, what would that be?
You could probably read between the lines what I would like to change on the platform from what we've just talked about. So I might frame that as ecosystem. So for me, most of the customers I work for is mostly like a lot of smaller government type departments that don't have big budgets, and so it's really, really hard to stand up business cases to do like the really cool stuff with ServiceNow, because it's priced based on value, like the potential maximum value you could get from something. So it just makes it really hard to stand up like really small, like one-time projects to then use that as maybe like the demonstration of value, but you can't justify it. Like, if you want to go App Engine, which is like, I've played with App Engine Studio, and it just, you can build stuff like so quickly, and there's tools in there that are way better than the normal platform stuff. There's like a way improved UI form editor that's like light years better than Form Designer, but you can't get it unless you got App Engine Studio, and that's priced as like, you can now build infinite apps through this studio, which is really awesome. But it's not priced at building one app, it's priced at building like all your enterprise apps. So
I
just don't work with massive enterprise customers, unfortunately. I work with smaller ones typically, or smaller government, and I want to do cool stuff, but a lot of the time I can't, because it's just really hard to stand up the business case. Like, a ServiceNow probably wouldn't be as big as they are if they didn't value price their stuff, and maybe I wouldn't be in this industry, I'd be in a different industry. So like, it works. Big players, all the big vendors do it because it works, and it means I haven't had to switch technology stacks in 11 years, which is really good, because it used to be like, what, you know, 2 ITSM tools at the same time, and then you have to learn another one, and they all use a different proprietary language, and they all have slightly different schemas and slightly different ways of working. It's just nice to be able to sit in one tech stack like pretty much my whole career. It's just been nice. So I can't really have it both ways, can I? It's just part of big software vendor, really. They all do the same thing, value pricing. I just wish it was more, that there were more like smaller options for the little guys to play with ServiceNow that don't have the big IT budgets. That's what I would like to change.
All right, but you did mention careers, and I like to close the show with, if you had advice for anybody who's early or starting their ServiceNow career today, what would that be?
I don't like giving out advice, kind of how, like, if you're a financial advisor, you wouldn't give out advice because you don't know everyone's got their own personal situations, and it's very easy to give generic advice that is actually bad advice for people, but you don't know their situation. But for new people, I think there's probably no better person to follow. This probably seems a little bit cheesy and not set up at all, but I think the best person to follow is probably the Duke. You're a coach, you run coaching programs, you post content that's kind of aimed at people that are trying to get into the industry. You spend a lot more time with new people getting in the industry than I do. So I don't like giving out tips, but if I do give out tips, if you've stumbled upon this on YouTube and you don't know who the Duke is, like, there's a lot of content from the Duke and advice that's probably way better than anything I can give on how to get started in ServiceNow. So just follow the Duke and you can't go wrong.
I just got to interrupt here and say that I did not pay Paul any money. I don't even know how to get money to Australia. So.
This is genuine. I've asked, like, I've been emailed before, like, people saying, like, oh, can you do this blog post and have some money on, like, a product I've never used before and can't endorse. So, like, if I don't like, do things. Well, I'll do something for money if I also believe in that thing, but I won't endorse something that I don't know anything about or don't actually believe in personally myself.
All right, we are at time, but I just want to make sure that you have an opportunity to tell the audience where they can read more about you and where they can reach you.
Cool. So I run a blog called sn-nerd.com. In today's age of Gen AI and content creation, there's a lot of content out there. And what my blog really aims to do is give you information that you can't find anywhere else, or add value to topics that are already being talked about, or just aggregating a whole bunch of information in one place for you. So if you want good quality information that's like up to date, I go through and update everything with new releases. It's a good place to go.
All right, we will have links to all those assets in the description below. Thank you again, Paul Morris, for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
If you're a ServiceNow expert looking for better opportunities, but maybe your resume or LinkedIn profile isn't doing you justice, reach out to me via LinkedIn or the email pictured here, as I offer both career coaching and recruitment services. And if you're a ServiceNow customer or partner, you heard that right. Robert Fedoruk now does ServiceNow recruiting. With a 1,500 subscriber YouTube channel and mailing list, and thousands of LinkedIn followers, let's make sure your open positions get first go at the prodigious pool of ServiceNow resources. Reach out via the email pictured here.